In. Greetings, greetings, welcome, 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 welcome. Greetings, Blog Talk Radio, area code 845-277-9143, 845 toll free, 845-277-9143. Press the number 1 on your telephone keypad and I will open your mic. But you can also please meet us here at StreamYard, YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, EarthCam. Turn your webcams on, turn your mic on, join us here at this lively conversation on revolutionary Voodoo, New Orleans Voodoo secrets and recipes. All is truly and indeed a blessing. Welcome, welcome, come on in, the fire is hot. The water is a-boiling. It's time to put something into this pot. Come on in. All is a blessing. Welcome, welcome. Greetings, greetings, greetings. I'm always honored by my international audience. Thank you so much. From where you're listening from all over the world, I'm grateful and I am appreciative. Come on in. Welcome, welcome. All is a blessing. All is truly and indeed a blessing. Welcome, welcome, beloved. Greetings and salutations, Martha Martinez. To you and yours, Ashley Allen. Greetings, beloved. Great afternoon, great morning, great evening. We are indeed international. Wherever you are in the world, whatever your time zone, we acknowledge you, we welcome you. Shamathia Rothschild, infinite gratitude to you and yours as well, beloved. Greetings and salutations. I honor your ancestors. I honor those great men and those great women, those great grandmothers and great grandfathers that stand up with you and for you. I acknowledge that great God and Goddess that exists within you. Welcome, S. Marie. Welcome, beloved. Greetings, greetings, greetings. Humbled and honored. Greetings. Thank you so much for taking the time out in the middle of your day to be present for another edition of Revolutionary Voodoo, New Orleans Voodoo Secrets and Recipes. Lakithia, I got new cousins for you to meet. I met these cousins by way of DNA, Ancestry.com. And you'll be meeting one, perhaps two of them momentarily. So stick around. All is a blessing. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for listening at work, for listening at home, for listening in your home offices, for listening from your devices. Greetings, greetings. Peace and love, joy and prosperity. Wanda Fanta, I'm going to have to get back to you, Wanda Fanta. I'm broadcasting live, beloved Wanda Fanta, so give me a moment. Greetings, I'm Mary's niece, beloved LLC, I'm Mary's niece. Peace and blessings, joy and prosperity to you and yours, Galactic Enterprise. Ashe. Greetings, greetings, greetings again. Yes, all is indeed a blessing. Welcome, welcome. Let me catch my breath. Divine, all blessed greetings and salutations, love, joy, and prosperity to you and yours. Elevation, revelations, and divine manifestation. You are now listening and sitting live once again with the DivinePrince, Pan-African Spiritualist, Practitioner, Author, and Advisor, Elagoon, Oloye, Hoodoo, Obeah, Bokur, sharing with you in all things spiritual, mystical, metaphysical, cosmic, evolutionary, revolutionary, healing, and holistic from a Pan-African Hoodoo, world spiritualist perspective. Understanding that all is truly and indeed a blessing if you can just see beyond the veils, for it is all just an illusion and a test in one of the greatest divine mysteries of this life cycle. This is indeed my constant prayer, my mantra, affirmation, reverberation, my reiteration, and it is my ever living reality. All is a blessing, is crucial to the very foundation of my inner standing, my teaching, my walk, my work, my demonstration along this divine, all blessed life path and journey. It is crucial to the very foundation of where I begin and end and crystallize all my endeavors, understanding that I and I alone create and co-create my divine destiny, and I alone create and co-create my divine, all blessed reality. And so it is. Ashe. Greetings to everyone, friends, family, blood relations. I'm truly honored and grateful when people take the time out in the middle of their day, wherever you are in the world listening and viewing with us right now, to be in this shared sacred space. So I'm truly honored, full of gratitude, humility, a little bit hydrated. So I'm gonna drink some water in a second. But I'm always honored when you take the time to visit with me, share with me, participate here with me in this sacred space at high noon, US Central Standard Time, New Orleans, Louisiana. I am the Pan-African Spiritualist, practitioner, author, and advisor. I'm here to share with you in all things spiritual, mystical, metaphysical, cosmic, evolutionary, revolutionary, healing, and holistic from a Pan-African Hoodoo world spiritualist perspective. I'm also going to introduce to some, reintroduce to others, my cousin, who's also been so gracious, so consistent, so humble, so strong in his demonstration here with us at high noon each and every day from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. So I also want to greet Oloye, Ifawole, Oladeji, Ifatande, to our community, to our shared space. Welcome, beloved. Welcome.
To everyone, I want to first give honor to the memory of the late Oba Shapana of Yarabaland, who made his transition to the ancestors approximately 24 hours ago, maybe a little bit more. And they had his ceremony, his rituals for burial. And so we want to give honor to him and his family, and pray that his family will be lifted up during this time, and that the shoes now that go to his son, Aluo Fashagun, that he'll be able to step in to these shoes, huge shoes, to move forward now, to continue his growth, to continue his strength. And prayerfully, everybody will be behind him. And, you know, as a young man, he'll be able to really take the lineage far, long and far. As today we are talking about Crossroads, I want to give you Oriki of Baba Eshu, owner of the Crossroads when it comes to us in Ifa. So we say Eshu Adara, Eshu Lanlu Agirioku. According to Orita, Ajo Langa Langa Lalu, Adin Lanja Lanja Lalu, Ode be a Jade Mole, Jade Niatara Bara Elefe, Tofi Deomawon, Oro Eshu, Toto Cone, Afe Edere Lale. Ishumasemio, Omoilo Mila Nicolose, Paado Subida, Noradora Sodisiwa. Ashe. We ask that Eshu, Baba Eshu, please open my good doors, rows, and paths, and all the good doors, rows, and paths of those who I love, and close the doors, rows, and paths of those who will seek to harm me, or those who I love. Likewise, I ask that Baba will open up the good doors, roads, and paths of each and every one of us here today and all those who we love, and close down the doors of anyone or anything meant to do harm to any of us or anyone that we love. So we honor Baba Eshu as we prepare to speak to the Crossroads today in a variety of different perspectives so that we move forward. He opens the door for all good things, really, all good relations, all good discussion today. Ashe.
Ashe, and always that was great and timely and powerful and edifying all at the same time. A capsule of information. And as you unpack it, you sort of laid the perfect introduction to this topic, to this subject matter. And before we move forward, again, I want to always invite people to please participate. Don't be bashful, don't be shy. Turn on those webcams. Let us see your face. Let us feel your energy. Share your questions, your comments, and your requests. I'm also available to those who are listening internationally by way of Blog Talk Radio at my Blog Talk Radio page at blogtalkradio.com/the-divine-prince. That phone number is 845. During shows only, live shows only, area code toll free 845 277-9143, 845-277-9143. And as my cousin so eloquently stated, and perfect to the topic of Crossroads, there are indeed so many inroads in and out of this subject matter that we can explore. Of course, we could talk about Crossroads deities and Crossroads culture throughout the diaspora, and how it has manifested itself now in modern culture, in modern society, and in some cases still in its more indigenous environment. The transport of what we call in Voodoo root loa, some of the deities that not only had an origin in the motherland, on the mother continent, but made its way, survived through the Middle Passage, and continued to be relevant, and indeed develop roots and new branches and new extensions even now in the present world. We not only could talk about Eshu and Papa Legba and deities Kalfo that are sort of well known about the Crossroads, but there are other deities in the diaspora, such as Saci, Saci, Saci from Brazil, which only has one leg, but two arms, and sometimes only one ear and one eye, and represents sort of the multifaceted aspects that are the quote unquote trickster that we often associate with the Crossroads. I'd like to talk about why we associate the trickster deities, the trickster gods, often with the Crossroads, and sort of introduce the idea, if I can, of it sort of being a place of portal energy, an opening, if you will. Sometimes a crossroad is marked on the ground, or marked in chalk, or marked in dust. Sometimes a crossroads is a bit of a circle, like the circle dance in the Gullah Geechee Low Country traditions, like the circle performance that you still see manifest in Congo Square. Heaven forbid we allow Congo Square to be altered or removed, but as we still see in Congo Square today, and in many of our traditions, we even see sort of that circle square dance set up, sometimes overtly and at other times sort of indirectly, in churches and in choirs, and in sort of the structure of how the body of the church is laid out. Sometimes is focused on a central point, or an apex point, if you will, and then the energy sort of radiates out from that place. So indeed, there's so many directions, so many layers to Crossroads, and as usual, I chose the topic intentionally uh, with the idea that we might be able to, expand upon it, and of course, allow the community to call in or tap in by video, or even communicate questions and comments by chat to add even more layer to this conversation. So, cousin, if you will, and if you would like to help me to sort of speak to why you believe Legba Eshu would indeed be one of the what we call in Voodoo root loa, or one of the main deities forces that we not only see within a diversity of West African ethnic groups, ethnic cultural diversity, but its ability to survive the Middle Passage and oppression and white supremacy, and why that has maintained itself as such a strong figure now in the West.
Ashe, Ashe. So when we look at Eshu, we look at Eshu in a couple of different varieties. One, we know of the story of Rumila and the supreme being Olodumare. That when before we come here to this plane, that we take our prayers to Olodumare, with Rumila being the witness to destiny, to come before coming here to this earth. There are some that say also that on the other side is Eshu. But when we look at Eshu, we're looking at the one who is the communicator, the gatekeeper, the one who can bring our prayers and our messages to all realms, to the realm of the ancestors, to the realm here in this right here in present time, to to any and all of the Orisha. He is the communicator, the divine communicator. When we look at Eshu as well, we look at the one who we must give to first before we give to other Orisha. He is the one that opens the opportunity, opens the doors, roads, and paths for all of us to have our prayers, our thoughts, our actions to come to manifestation. When we look at Eshu, born in Oshe from as the son of Oshun. We look at the intercorrelation between Eshu and Oshun. We look at Eshu as Oshun, of course, being the divine mother, the one who brings sweetness, joy, financial prosperity, all the sweet things of life. And then when we look at Eshu as being the one that can get our mind when we're thinking. He can give us the blessings of our good choices, but also show us where we are when we don't really choose in a proper or wise place. There are some that calls Eshu the devil. There's some that call him Satan. And we don't look at Eshu as no Satan. We look at Eshu as one that can help us to make good choices. And then when we make the good choices, the manifestation of the blessings thereof. So when we look at Eshu as the great communicator, the one that can give us the wisdom in our thought that lives in the back of the head, going down into the top of the spine, then we're looking at the one. When we're looking in that place, it's like the communication that goes with the into the spine. The spine has its own level of communication that allows us, to be able to move, to be able to walk, to be able to communicate, all of that above, right? So therefore, when we're looking at Eshu, and of course the divine relationship with Eshu and Ori, Eshu and all the Orisha, stories abound in the tradition of how Orunmila, in many of his seeking of wisdom to go to Dafa, which is the divination, goes to Eshu. Eshu reveals what needs to be done. And then when it's followed appropriately, that all that has been prayed for will come into being, will come into manifestation. It talks about Eshu in many times changing and disguising himself in a lot of different ways, and that this, he can be this to this person and this to this person. There's so much to go with that goes with Eshu. Um, you know, we look at Eshu as that communication between I believe you call it dimensions, right, cousin?
Yes.
So the communicator between the various dimensions that can take levels of our communication up through the different dynamics of that. So to kind of tie in some of the things or the aspects that my cousin kind of brings into being, it is Eshu that we go to that allows us to communicate in between them from the perspective that I have learned.
Yeah, and listen, we always are welcome to, you sharing your own perspective, as I'm sure the beloved Otun, another one of our cousins, beloved, that I discovered by way of Ancestry.com. I have a cousin in the room, um, Lakithia M, and I won't say her last name, but Lakithia M. She's a blood relative of ours, and so I want her to greet the two blood relative of ours that are now on the screen, Otun, the beloved Otun, and Oloye. He spoke first. So greetings to the family. If y'all haven't gotten your DNA done, you better get with it. Okay. I should be getting a commission check back from Ancestry.com and 23andMe for all of the promotion that I do. Leani, we're going to answer your question next. Does Eshu govern our nervous system? She said, hey, family. And I'm going to give Otun an opportunity to respond first. Come on, Otun, beloved.
Aboroboye, Aboshishe, Divine, and Baba Oloye, my cousin's family, everyone watching, listening. It's a blessing to be here. Want to give honor to my Luo, Prince Baba, Adabayo Latona, and Olari, Ifatoyen, Yalode, Ekenike, Oyebola Latona. It is indeed a pleasure to be here. As far as the question, am I answering? And hi, cousin. I wanted to say acknowledge. How you doing? I wanted to the question that you said we was answering.
Well, well, first it's the subject matter, which is the crossroads, and of course, as you can imagine, we can talk about the crossroads, and we might in the course of time that we have left, in many different ideas and fashions. I think the question I asked was sort of the idea that as a root loa or root power, we've developed this system of the 7 African powers, particularly here in the North America. That's unique to Botanica culture, Southern Black culture, and now spiritual culture, in America. And so why is it that we've sort of pulled those particular 7 powers out from the other deities and our knowledge and awareness of other deities that may have also made the Middle Passage and quite possibly made its way up from South America, Central America, Cuba. So by the time you came into the conversation, we were talking more specifically about Eshu, Legba, Kalfo, who indeed we often associate with the crossroads or as crossroads deities. I'm not suggesting to anyone who's, fact checking that Eshu and Legba and Kalfo and Salsi are exactly the same deity. I'm not alleging that. I am alleging, however, that they all have commonalities, and one of their main commonalities is the crossroads. Another of their commonalities is being the trickster. And so in your opinion, why do you think, and I'm not suggesting above or below all, but why in particular Eshu, Legba, even more so than a Yemayao, Oshun, Shango, Orinle, Olokun, why do you think that deity in particular has made the Middle Passage with great durability, and now continues to sort of evolve and be present in modern ATR practice.
Okay. Well, basically, from what I have been taught, um, the differences, um, outside of the obvious being the different spiritual systems, and the references that they made to the deities that you mentioned, or the Orisha, however they are recognized in what you practice. A lot of that comes from folklore, and I think in the case of Eshu, because he has so many characteristics, or as Baba Oloye said in the church, some have kind of aligned him with being the devil, because in the Bible, as you know, the devil can take any form. He is known to be a trickster. He has direct contact, to God, can speak directly to him, things like that. He also has divine knowledge, and with that, he can use that to his whim, sort of. And so we find the similarities in that. What we must understand also in dealing, particularly in Ifa, as far as the characteristics of Eshu, how is he to be connected with and worship, that also goes on lineage, because each lineage teaches something different, and it's according to how that family grew up and what their generational practices are. Eshu, I would say, is to be respected because he is that connection. As Baba Oloye said, he's that connection between us and some of the Orisha. He's that one that can be that middleman, so to speak, if you will, to if you need to maybe have a connection with the Orisha, or if you need to, present an offering or do certain things. A lot of the times, that is a good. He is the one, because he is the messenger and goes back and forth from heaven, and here he's the, that's his role. That's one of his roles. So he is to be respected because he plays that role. And a lot of the times, the lack of respect or the lack of humility in approaching issue will cause, issues, because in it you will also get that lesson while he's dealing with you. So it's not so much to say he's a trickster and just doing things to turn your day around. It's a lesson in everything. There's something in everything. So we have to be willing to take a moment and understand, to stop and go, okay, what is it that I need to see here? What is it that I'm missing? What is it that I need to recognize? And in that moment, we can kind of get to understand what it is that he does, the role he plays, and how we are also to interact with him.
Yeah, I find it interesting that we equate Legba or even Eshu, and the many other forms that, trickster, crossroads deities show up. We tend to associate them with the key. We tend or having the keys, if you will. We tend to associate them with being a light bearer, or the light bearer, which goes along with some people's attempt to sort of correlate Legba with Lucifer in some traditions. I also want to introduce, art forms like blues, for instance. And so, what is it about the crossroads and the devil and blues artists like Robert Johnson, allegedly selling their soul to the devil at the crossroads, in order to gain some kind of power, some kind of gift. So I think we, often maybe put a whole lot extra on the church as sort of a reason for this association between Eshu and Legba and the devil still being active in our culture, without understanding that some of us have to take some responsibility for sort of layering that and making that synchronicity, and it could be, the flip side of any other synchronized deity or saint that we, took on as sort of a cover or a front that allowed us to continue to practice these traditions, and particularly here in the American South. you know, in Black culture here in America. So we see a lot of references in blues and to some degrees jazz and therefore hoodoo and sort of pop culture about these devilish characteristics, again, linked to sort of the trick that's associated with these crossroads deities. And I like how you said something that's very similar to what I say, Oloye, about ego being really the factor. The trick or the supposed, I like to say the illusion of an issue, a block, a complication is often about ego and getting that out of way of our own life, our own God self, and our own ability really to hear and perceive the spirit realm, which my mom taught me, you know, speaks in a soft, still voice. My mom taught us this from a child that God speaks in a soft, still voice. It won't argue with you. She won't debate with you. He won't go back and forth with you. He won't shout real loud, you know, over the other noise that we're, you know, kind of taking in at every level of our dimensional being each and every day. And even with meditation, even with fasting, even with being still, even with being quiet, you know, even with taking the sabbatical, we still might not hear that soft, still voice clearly. And so we do seek elders, we do seek leaders in the spiritual religious realm. We do seek advice from the spirit realm, you know, itself. But our ancestors who live and exist in our blood, you know, they'll box your ears. That's the illusion of an issue, a block, or complication. And so I often think that, you know, even in that frame of reference, Legba and Eshu get blamed for, just like the devil, get blamed for a great deal more, you know, than what we should probably be taking responsibility for in terms of our own actions, our own motivations, our own spiritual intentions, whatever the religious tradition might be. Because when I see the cross, when I see the crucifix, I see the crossroads, you know, and I can find the crossroads reference in every culture, in every indigenous ethnic culture, you know, throughout the world. And along with them comes this similarity of the trickster deity. Here in the Deep South, we have Burr Rabbit. Some of you remember the stories about Burr Rabbit, you know, and the signifying monkey, you know, another sort of American born out of the red and black soil of America, sort of Oriki-like stories that developed on this side of the ocean. Burr Rabbit and signifying monkey would be a very, very good example. So we see, you know, in this amalgamation and this synchronizing, you know, a mix of particularly trickster deities like Legba, like Limba, like Eshu, you know, like Ilegwa, like Kalfo, like many others that I could name in other traditions. And something else too I thought might be interesting for us to talk about is the change in the symbolism. Because often when you see Legba, particularly in West Africa, it's a penis sticking out of the ground at the crossroads. And I learned somewhere in the junior high school, you know, that this symbol was also found in Asia, in China, in India, and farmers would paint a penis on the side of their barn, not for its necessarily its sexual connotation, its overtly sexual connotation, but for the idea of fertility.
That's right.
and crop growth and reproduction. So when we think about things getting sort of watered down or amalgamated and then tailored to sort of meet the Christian taste, so they're not like immediately offended, you know, when they see something, we now begin to see Legba and Ilegwa taking on other, I'll say, more safe forms and symbolisms that don't necessarily shock people, you know, right away or as, you know, immediately. even in the implements used in Santeria and Lukomi, for instance, a great deal of the power behind Ilegua is hidden. It's concealed. It's not readily visible, and you sort of have the outside body of a thing that implants a psychic message, but then those who know and understand what's going on inwardly don't see, just a random penis, don't see just a random stone, don't see just, a random shell, but they see the housing, for spirit. So I think, Legba, Eshu, these crossroad deities survived, one, out of necessity, and two, out of just their sheer durability as a power, as a force, particularly when we think about the things that hold them in common, that tie them together. There are other deities that many don't readily associate with being crossroad deities, but that indeed would apply, particularly in Voodoo. And Dambala would be considered a crossroads deity. It has a similar job to Eshu in that its ability to traverse what the Haitians call Pitu Matan, or the center post that separates heaven and earth, that separates the Loa and the higher realms, and earth. And so we see a similar symbolism in Southeast Asia and India, with the Kundalini and the rising of this serpent force, again, at the crossroads of our body, our spine, so again, our center post, and allowing this evolution of energy to grow and to develop. And when we think about dimensional spaces, many of you have been listening, regularly, and have been following along with our conversation about dimensional spaces. And Dark Soul Jua, I am going to acknowledge you and your comment. Just give me a moment, because I think I have to take a special moment to stop and talk about Portia. That's a whole nother energy unto itself. So just give me a moment. So sort of the idea of durability, transportability, the notion that we, consider Legba, Eshu, to sort of be the first to be acknowledged, the last to be, acknowledged in ceremony, sort of synchronizes again with its durability here in the West, and its ability to stand up and be loud and be prominent, even with all of our technology and our changing, social structures, and still be a viable power that, many of us draw from. I also think of the crossroads, quantum metaphysically, as I often do, as sort of a black hole maybe, or even a light hole maybe, where we transcend, as Eshu is said to do, as Legba is said to do, earth and sky, or heaven and earth, and our ability to enter into other dimensional spaces. And so we know, in string theory, in M theory, that we indeed exist in at least 10, some scientists say 11, some scientists say 26 inter and intra dimensional spaces, at once. I know most of you are aware of the first 3 or 4 dimensions. The first 3 dimensions are dimensions of space, length, width, and height, while the 4th dimension is of time. And that's the one that we don't have any control over. When I think of numbers and numerology and the number 3, I see Legba, I see the crossroads, that interaction between man and spirit, earth and sky, that which we can control, that which we can move, that which we can manipulate, it being in that first 3 dimensions. Once we go into 4 and higher octaves, we're not as immediately able to control or influence. But indeed, I'm suggesting that there are spiritual tools that we can use to influence these other dimensional spaces and bring them into our reality. The last dimension that I talked about in a previous broadcast, I believe, was the fifth dimension. So I'm going to go on and speak to six and some of the higher dimensions. I also want to speak about some things that I was taught when I was young through some of my initiatory processes about the prophets and how the prophets come through in certain numbers, in certain math, in certain geometry. And I was taught certain sort of rules about, the number 3, the triangle, and the number 4, the square, and the number 5, the pentagram, or the inverted pentagram, depending on how it's being utilized. The six, number 6, then being the 6-pointed star, and that this was the sign of the prophets. And we were taught particular prophets, including Buddha and Jesus and Muhammad and several others that had come through, over the course of human history, and them resonating through this vibration, this number. And in a geometric form, the 6-pointed star. I was always also taught that there was a connection between that and the formation of quartz crystal, which often in its raw, uncut, unpolished form grows in points of 6 sides. If there's a 7th side, it would be the point. So this resonance of 6, the number 6, and now the understanding about the 6th dimension. The 6th dimension gives more powers to a person living in that dimensional space than in the other or previously discussed dimensional spaces in the podcast. He can not only move in any direction in time at his will, but can also take many forms at the same time, just like we described the quantum world. We know that the quantum world is a world of probabilities, where particles can be present at different places at the same time and can take different forms. So the 6th dimension gives more flexibility in comparison to the 5th dimension. So when we think about prophets like Buddha, Muhammad, the Christ, stories about them being seen in more than one place at the same time, or being able to transcend time and space, or transcend heaven and earth, which requires some abilities to manipulate not only those first 3 dimensional spaces, but the 6th dimensional space. The 6th dimensional space gives more flexibility than in the 5th, and in the 6th we enter the world of parallel universes, the concept of multiverse. This dimension will allow us to see all the possible presents, past, and future. But every universe present in this multiverse will have the same beginning as that of our known universe, or the Big Bang, if you will. And that is the limitation of the 6th dimension. So it is believed that if you, are working yoga and your mantras and, whatever physical art you might be practicing along with that, diet, meditation, that we are able to transcend, if not in our dream state, most certainly in our transcendental meditative state, and on a progressive level, eventually in a more conscious state and ability to sort of go in and out of these various dimensional spaces. And my regular listeners and my godchildren know that I swear by quartz crystal. I believe there's an innate gift, ability embedded in that design. Call it the design of God, call it the design of nature. Whomever you give credit to the creation and design of quartz crystal is indeed a superior thing when you begin to look at it from its mathematical perspective, its chemical perspective, its industrial and technological perspective, how it indeed is being utilized today in technology in comparison to how our indigenous ancestors described their use of the dream stone, their use of quartz crystal, the possible idea of them levitating and using vibration and light to move stones to create structures like the pyramids and other great megaliths. From a mathematical level, from a physics level, we have to then begin to look at string theory, M theory, and the idea that we can manipulate time and space and reality in a multitude of ways if we would just begin to exercise as we do our bodies, as we do our intelligence, exercise that spiritual part of us that I believe the crossroads represent. The seventh dimension also includes the concept of parallel universes. Seventh dimension contains infinite numbers of universes. So a person living in the seventh dimension can move in any universe and can have infinite forms of itself. The basic difference between the sixth and the seventh dimension is that the infinite universes in the sixth dimension had the condition that they all must have the same beginning as ours. Again, i.e. the Big Bang. But the seventh dimension is free from this condition also. Seventh dimension can contain a plane of all possible universes with different start conditions. Universes present in this dimension may have originated from different possibilities. I was just thinking of Star Trek and the original Star Trek, where, in my opinion, they made a concerted effort to go in and out of not just different places in the quote unquote sky, but different times, locations within the universe. The first imaginative introduction, probably for many of us, of quantum metaphysics was Star Trek, and their use of time, space, that playing around with the idea of multiverses, humanoids taking on various forms, life taking on various forms, contingent on the universe, the dimensional space that they were able to sort of move in and out of. And then the newer forms of Star Trek introduced technologies, some of which mirror some of the items that we carry around today, like your cell phone. Some would say that came out of the imagination of Star Trek universe. Our hand devices, some of the newer palm and fingerprint technologies and eye technologies that we now use today.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I have to say, in the possibility, particularly in the dynamics of how we view these universes, of extraterrestrial intervention. Not necessarily aliens in the way we've been sort of made to see them in entertainment, but extraterrestrial nonetheless.
I agree. I think that what you're saying fits absolutely perfectly into the interdimensional perspectives of understanding Eshu. Because if he's going from one realm to another realm, then it's that interdimensional travel that we're talking about. We have then the ability within us through Eshu, through our practice or worship with Eshu, to be able to speak with our ancestors, to be able to work with our ancestors, that our ancestors then will communicate with us and tell what they like, don't like. We also, for those of us that have that close connection, we hear our ancestors, or we see our ancestors. They show up. And so that's an interdimensional, communication right there. With even our Orisha, with our Orisha, we have a way of communicating with Orisha, but of course, when we're giving our offering to Eshu, we ask Eshu to please take our communications to whatever Orisha it is that we're talking about, and to take our prayers to Olodumare, right? So with that being said, it is my perspective that the interdimensional communication is through the divine relationship with Eshu.
Absolutely. Yes. And the Goddess Initiative, that wasn't a distraction. I know a little bit, about that environment, and I know that Larry Hoover and King David gained a great deal of that information from orders, spiritual orders that existed in our community at that time, who were teaching knowledge and who, quite frankly, originally set out to give this knowledge, to the brother and the sister at the street level, as a deterrent to street life. So some of us know the story. I'm from Chicago, born in Chicago. I know the story, and we're not going to digress too much on the story. But yeah, that originally came out of, groups that, at the same time that they were gaining knowledge, like many of our young people today, they were growing greatly disenchanted with the system and the disparities in the system in race and class and who got money to pay for education, medication, child care, et cetera. And that's how many of these groups, began to develop, originally. Uh, and I'm probably just old enough to sort of see a growth pattern there. And then I can remember a point where it was just an all for one, one for all, a free for all, just a toss up, which is kind of what we have going on now. There's no real allegiance to any real foundation other than get money, drugs and maybe sex. It's certainly not anything what we had in mind, back in the 50s or 60s, in the 70s when many of those groups were active and in development. Leonie is also asking, what are the principles of the six-pointed star? I'd like to respond to that, and I'm sure maybe my panelists would also like to respond to that. I'd first like to say, just like the Odus, there are many principles. With each number, and then with each new combination of numbers, there comes a whole nother listing, if you will, of principles. Sometimes those principles sound like ideas. Sometimes they sound like taboos. Sometimes they sound like, just wisdom, but put in a way that we can sort of grapple with and understand. I like to teach that before you get to the 6-point star, you got to begin with one. In Arabic, that they might say the alif. Depending on what system, they might speak of the primordial point in which all creation sort of exploded from. Science might even suggest that all creation exploded from a single point, something maybe smaller than an atom, but still quite not describable, that then spewed out all of matter and creation. So that's what I mean when I say there are many principles. And that's why we initiate into many of these traditions, because it's a great deal of information to memorize. And so you memorize through music, through chant, through words, through symbolism, through numbers, through references to historic events, to other manifestations. So there might be many, but I'm just going to speak to a few. So 2 is a defensive number, as opposed to 3 being an offensive number. And I'm teaching real science here right now. 2, polarities, balance, sometimes opposites. That the crossroads exist first at the center of two, that polarity. Three, you've gone from a straight line or two-dimensional reality to now three, width, height, length. Again, I suggest Eshu Legba stands up in that triangle. Okay, the only three things that we really can control. So that's why I say it's an offensive number, as opposed to two being a defensive number. And I could go much deeper, but I don't want to digress. Four is that square, and I think about the elements, earth, water, fire, air, mind, or ether, or the spirit realm would have to exist within that and also surrounding that. But that's another topic. I also see the ancestors coming forward in number four and in the square. And then I can relate that into principles as well, beloved. Five is the number of man. Earth, water, fire, air, mind, and ether. I like to count it earth, water, fire, air, mind, or ether, and God, or the spiritual space. Us being that thing in creation that can make choice, make decision, which again leads to the inversion of the five-pointed star. What some people say is the Godhead. Some people say that makes it inherently wicked. Some people suggest it's man now acting in ego and not divine order or divine connection with God. And so when I get to the six-pointed star, you've got three forces, three facing up from earth to God, three facing down from God to earth, and that's how you then create that six-pointed star. So that's why I was taught that the prophets, those who've gone beyond just being human, just being a man or a woman, just living for self, just the first five chakras, but associate that sixth chakra, seventh chakra development, as those of us among us, that percentage, and some people suggest that it's a particular percentage. Some people say five, some people have chosen some other numbers, a percentage of those who actually obtain that level of vibratory connectedness with the divine. I was taught a bit of a limerick: as is above, so shall it be below. I heard that's in the Bible, So what are those three things that are coming from earth to the sky? And what are those three things that are coming from the sky to earth? And so then that opens up, another layer of principles that any secret society, any system, any secretive system might mask behind that six-pointed star. So that's just a start. That's not in any way all-inclusive. I've got a whole lot of other information in my head behind each number, each geometric representation, and then how that might be manifest in our reality, but also utilized in our reality to our best interest. The eighth dimension, according to string theory, there would be no physical existence of any object that's present in the eighth dimension. So anything living in this dimension would not be able to touch anything, nor could it be touched by anything, or anyone has nothing. So anyone living in this dimension would not be able to touch anything, nor can it be touched by anything or anyone, as nothing will have any physical existence in the eighth dimension. If you find it difficult to imagine, then you can understand it like the digital world that we are all familiar with. The eighth dimension will contain a plane of all the possible presents, past, and future for all the infinite number of parallel universes that are stretching up to infinity. In the ninth dimension is again very interesting and unbelievable in that in the ninth dimension it is possible for many civilizations or aliens or extraterrestrials to live at the same place and at the same time without seeing or feeling the presence of the other, meaning being completely unaware of the presence of the other reality. If someone is able to see, then he might be seeing all the civilizations and aliens living together at the same time, at the same place smoothly, but independently of each other. A person living in the ninth dimension will be able to move in any infinite number of universes, will have no physical form, will be able to move in all presents, past, and futures of any infinite number of universes that are extending to infinity. One different thing that will happen in the universes of the ninth dimension will be that these universes may have their own laws of physics and separate conditions and probabilities of their origin. Now, again, for those who are just tuning in, the string theory suggests we live in at least 10, and notice that I say inter, I-N-T-E-R, and then I say intra, I-N-T-R-A, because they have very different meanings. To move intra-dimensionally, to move within oneself, but at deeper dimensional spaces of oneself, could be a way of understanding intra-dimensional. Interdimensional is sort of us moving out of this time and space into another time and space and back. And in the previous show, we suggested we get hints of that. We get flashes of that. You might call it a vision. You might call it a dream. You might say, God showed me something and the sky opened up. And particularly when I think about generations before us, who, language continues to evolve and expand and change, who didn't necessarily have language, use language that we use today, like shadow work. No one said shadow work 30 years ago, completely, new thing. But it might suggest a concept that we all understand that might transcend time and space. So imagine our ancestors trying to describe some vision, some wheel spinning in the middle of the wheel, some god or some man on the chariot on a white horse coming out of the sky. There are many references in even the Bible and the Quran that we could pull from that would suggest either extraterrestrial technology, some form of technology, industry, machinery that we are presently not aware of, or what many of our ancestors suggest, that they were able to move in and out of time and space. And they may have referenced it as the dream space. They may have referenced it as transcending physical by way of meditation, fasting, other techniques, forms of martial arts, Tai Chi, are designed at its core to transcend the physical and capture a part of our power, call it chi, call it ashe, call it magic, that might indeed be the very thing that holds all life, all creation together. So I think that concept of the crossroads is universal to the world, to okay, Otun's got Shango and Oya going on at her house. And they've knocked out the power and they've knocked out the Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm.
So she's just now returning. We got you, beloved. We got this thing we used to do here in New Orleans, and particularly before Hurricane Katrina. When there would thunder and lightning, the storm would come through and the power would go out, them brothers would pull out them drums and they would shout to the sky, they would chant to the sky, to Shango and Bade and Sokbo and other, Loa and Orisha of lightning and thunder in the sky, and Oya, and beg the sky not to fall. and beg the spirits not to flood the world again. You know, that's not quite as common now as it was before Katrina, but that's just a New Orleans thing. I just thought I might share that. I like that Shemafia, 6 proteins, 6 electrons, 6 neutrons. I know I got some mathematicians, some scientists, you know, some biologists in my audience, some master researchers in my audience, people that just know how to research the hell out of something. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Y'all know I'm not talking about the top of my head. And, you know, this is something I started learning as a teenage runaway on the street, sitting at the feet of master teachers of various sects that some don't even exist anymore. You know, the Ansuru was just strong, you know, in the 70s. And at that time, for those who remember, this is before Dr. York became Dr. York, they used to have these comic books that they would flood the Black community with. And these comic books would have stories, you know, Black Bible stories in it, and would talk about Black history and about Arab culture and about Egyptian culture, but from a Black nappy perspective. It also was coming out right about the same time that hand-dipped incense and body oil, I'm serious, y'all, this real history was introduced, you know, to our communities. If you think about the 50s, it wasn't no hand-dipped incense, no body oils. Nobody knew what that was. Nobody was selling that here. And I can't tell you exactly why, other than the Black Muslims brought that in. Now, what may have been behind that, I'm not exactly sure, but that import of that culture, that the interest in Black culture, Arab culture, Asiatic culture, helped to fuel that presence. So I was an adamant weekly addict to body oil and incense. You know, you go to work, you get your paycheck. Friday, you cash your check, you stop by and get your body oil and your incense. I mean, that's what you did, you know, back then. And they had these comic books. Again, this is before Dr. York really became Dr. York. He's had many incarnations. Some of y'all know the story. And they would teach and share, you know, metaphysics, math, science, you know, through these comic books. Some of you may not be aware that that's part of the FOI training. You know, they talk about the distance to the moon and, you know, math, and real
circumference.
Science. Yeah, you know, and it leads to not just, you know, knowing and harboring a great deal of information, but the idea is as you know, gain more, it's almost like your mind should be expanding, you know, like a rubber bag. And so the more knowledge and the more information you gain, the greater your chakras and your head is able to open up to even higher concepts of wisdom and information. And so I do believe in spirit and spiritual phenomenon specific to the creation of downloading information or giving us glimpses into other dimensional time spaces, whether they be in the past or the present or the future, depending on how we are in tune with that vibration, with that connection. It can show up as possession in Haitian and in Louisiana Voodoo. It can show up in possession in Lukumi ceremonies and Orisha, you know, Bata ceremonies where people will become, you know, the Orisha will become the ancestors, you know, within the dynamics of a scenario. I believe it's not weird. I believe it's not, you know, we call it supernatural because it's outside of our awareness of what's natural. You know, for those of us who may have had multiple experiences of the quote unquote supernatural, it might not seem so supernatural to us. And the more I explore and learn math, because math wasn't my best subject now. So, you know, it is all because of voodoo and understanding the spirit world that I have any kind of interest in math today, physics today, science today. I mean, if they had taught it from this perspective as a kid, maybe I would have paid more attention. And my mom says, you know, they were moving too slow for me. I found the museum much more interesting than the average, you know, classroom as a kid growing up. And that's why I say if your kids are struggling or need a little extra push, it's not just, beat the books harder. It's not just beat your kids harder. It's not just, they need more tutoring, though tutoring could be very effective. But take them out into the real world where they can see math and science and medicine being applied. So no matter where you live, work those museums, work those museums, work those museums. I can't tell you what going to museums really do to children, young people, and even adults in expanding our awareness of any topic, any subject matter, not just spirituality and religion. But for those of us who don't have a passport or who aren't prepared to travel or who might, can't travel, we can travel in our heads. We can travel in our consciousness, at the library. We can travel, at the museums, and our museums have gotten really creative over the recent years, and really creating virtual realities. Sometimes it's, computer generated, sometimes it's on film, sometimes it's audio induced, but ways of really manipulating our imagination. The one thing we seem to be losing, in humanity is our imagination, is our creativity. We want to look alike, dress alike, act alike, think alike. That presents a bit of a challenge to us. That's a crossroads. When you're in that workspace or that business space, or that real life, space, and you're forced to have to, meet life on life's terms and expand your awareness of something. It is not in our best interest to be too routine, to be too comfortable. We have to switch it up a little bit. And if we don't switch it up, life will tend to switch it up a little bit. It's nothing more devastating for me than the client who's, oh wow, I'm doing a lot of talking, than the client who, has gotten comfortable in a particular scenario for 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, and all of a sudden things change. You get up to go to the bathroom and come back and all the pieces on the chessboard have been moved around, and you're like, what do I do now? It's a form of a crossroads. And I like to use black obsidian a lot, by the way, in addressing crossroads, and particularly what might feel like an illusion of a block, an issue, a complication. Black obsidian, volcanic glass, black obsidian, particularly when it's polished and polished like a spear. This is a one opportunity for my clients and my godchildren where you buy a polished stone, and that's black obsidian. Spear points, sharp instruments in the indigenous world were made out of black obsidian. So if it's broken, if it's fractured, it can be very sharp, sharper than glass, sharper than some of the best knives, and it can cut you. So this is an occasion where you absolutely want your product to be polished. And spheres, balls, black obsidian balls are easy to come by and very economical, as a matter of fact. But they often present colors and bullseyes within them, which I often use to mimic, to emulate the black hole and the black hole theory. Now, it will pull up shadow work to the surface. Unlike quartz, it can't clean it. It can't cleanse it. In fact, it's the exact opposite. You have to cleanse your black obsidian regularly that you're using, and particularly when you're using it out in the open to do work. Often I keep my black obsidian covered when I'm not using it to do work, because its energy is just that strong. And like a black hole, it'll suck all energy, including light, into it. And so its purpose is to bring shadows, the darkness, the issue, the block, the complication, or the illusion thereof. Because when it's undamaged, it shines like in a mirror, so that we then can redirect that energy somewhere else. Now, I'm gonna do this for my cousin Oloye. So from a martial arts perspective, or a Tai Chi perspective, or even from a Reiki perspective, that energy has been brought up, so now you want to send that energy away. You want to draw that out and send it away. When working with other stones, and I strongly suggest when working with black obsidian, that you balance it with really clear stones, like selenite, or quartz crystal, as a part of that, not only drawing out and sending away what's not usable, but then infusing light into that cavity. Because you can remove something out and then leave an opening, and then leave a cavity. That's why some people give up one addiction to move to another. Some people give up drugs and alcohol, but then they, at the AA meeting, smoking 2 packs of Cool 100s, and 5 pots of coffee a day, because that void has to then be supplemented, has to be filled. Black obsidian balls, spheres, with the bullseye in particular, are also good for seeing beyond the veils. Sometimes it's the past, sometimes it's the present, to get clarity about what needs to be healed, removed. So for me, it's a spherical crossroads between light and darkness. It carries the highest vibration of light in black stones, black obsidian, and then being able to sort of divert that energy. And that energy has to be diverted. I often say, all energy was created at the Big Bang, at the beginning of the universe. So all energy that's going to be created is already here. So we have to remove it, but then send it away. And it could be recycled, if you will, in nature, and come out the other end of a black hole as white light, to the better use of something somewhere else, in nature. So not just the drawing of the veve to create the black hole, the crossroads, not just the ceremony that we do in the street, the crossroads, but there's indeed the reference of the crossroads that we see in quantum math, quantum science, in space. And that's my sort of take on how that manifests in outer space. And of course, I could talk about black matter and dark matter and what that is, but I'll save that for another episode. There's so much in the chat. Please, guests, let me check my phone lines. Thank you so much, callers on the phone line. Indeed, if you have a question, comment, or request, remember to press the number 1. That sort of raises your hand for me virtually here. And then I'll bring you into the conversation. If you're just listening, that's good too. And we indeed appreciate your listenership. Yes, Shemafia and the goddess. I think that crossroads can also be created. They are not just sort of the thing that we walk into in life. We trip upon, the block, the issue, the complication, the crossroads. But again, I think in religious spaces, whether it be the circle, whether it be the drawing of a square, whether it be the putting a veve down, or even creating, shrine space for your ancestors, is introducing, reinforcing a theoretical crossroads now in your home or in your living space. The crossroads between your waking, quote unquote, reality. I say quote unquote because I believe the spirit realm is more real than the physical reality. And then that spirit reality that we understand our ancestors and other powers to exist in. So even the church, a crossroads can sort of be created spontaneously as well as consciously in any given ceremony, and we see that manifest in many religions. I don't see church very differently than I do other ritualized traditions. When you're seeing it with your third eye open, even in the quiet churches,
and the symbology.
Yeah.
The symbology of the cross alone gives you insight on just the manifestation of crossroads within church. So what is it that you are willing, desire to manifest? You go to the crossroads, which they call as the one who has the communication between, or the one we go to in the church would be Jesus, right? But then we look at Eshu, and we look at the lettering behind Eshu, and then the actual what do you call it, sounds and stuff in the Hebrew language, Yeshua, right? Then there is no J, there is no S, and Eshu then is even a stronger manifestation within that. You hear the song, I go to the rock of my salvation. So what is the symbology of Eshu? The symbology of Eshu in Isese, in traditional African traditionalism, is a Yangi stone. Yangi stone. So the Yangi stone is that rock. When we're going and we're feeding Eshu, or we're working with Eshu, we're communicating with the shrine of Eshu, which is the Yangi stone. I go to the rock. Salvation. What is salvation? Salvation is within you. So when you go to the rock for your salvation, you're going to the rock to manifest what it is that you want to come to pass. So you're either going to make good choice or a bad choice, but then Eshu is going to bring out to you the blessing of the good choice or the challenge of the bad choice. So therefore, the symbology behind this is deeper than what it is even said within, in any of that understanding. For the most part, it takes going outside of that to get the understanding within that. So just a little bit the symbology is important. We got to look at what the symbology deeply represents, and not just look at it as the Christians talk about serving idols, worshiping idols and stuff like that. It's not idolatry, right? It's something that encompasses that energy within you to manifest outward. So therefore, when we're going to this and we see the symbology behind some of these orisha, I won't talk about that. But in each orisha that you receive or that you initiate to, there's distinct symbology that represent the aspects of those orisha. When you look at Eshu, what is the aspect of Yangi? And when you find that out, then you begin to understand just how you can move closer and work even closer with Eshu to manifest all that you desire.
Ashe. And when I think about baptism, Otun, that's a bit of a crossroads, right? I mean, we accept Aaron Samdi and Papa Gede as sort of being Loa deities that, like Eshu, transcend between earth and heaven, the living and the dead, if you will, the marketplace and the cemetery, and so even when we think about baptism and the ideas that you're supposed to be dying to the flesh or dying to your own self to get up and be renewed again, to be reborn again. So, we see the footprint of ritualized ceremony honoring and acknowledging the crossroads, even when it's not necessarily referred to as such. But we see the symbolism and some of the meaning, represented there. I want to speak also to a video I saw the other day, and someone was trying to convince you that Jay-Z and several others were doing this because it represented a Masonic symbolism and that it was somehow satanic or wicked. I offer you that some people are doing this because it represents the great vagina and the great mother from whom we all came into this world through. When I think about the black stone, the Kaaba stone, in where is it in Mecca, where the Muslims go, look at that stone again, and particularly how they have it set in that silver framework in the Kaaba stone. I see the yoni symbol. I see the great vulva. I don't see Satanism. I don't see witchcraft. And
Mm-hmm.
so understanding the dynamics of symbolism, particularly within our culture,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in an environment, or I should say specifically in an environment where we're apt to want to mix and borrow a little bit and trade a little bit. You know, I just suggest caution there, because we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater often. We're throwing out what originated really with us and has now become masked behind other traditions. And we accept that Christianity to a great degree um, amalgamated what we know as pagan or indigenous world symbolism into Christian tradition, and then gave it another name, then gave it another, another appearance. But you know, people are getting quick likes on some of these videos. On the surface, it sounds real deep, but yeah, I offer you that it's actually a representation of the Great Mother. I just had
Mm-hmm.
to point that out while we were talking about
Mm-hmm.
crossroads, transcending time and space, coming from one dimensional space to another, crossing from one way of understanding something to another. Otun, did you want to share, beloved?
I did also want to add that when you mentioned divine, the baptism, I also wanted to add that baptism in itself, although some that follow Christianity may not want to acknowledge, but that in itself is actually a ritual
Mm-hmm.
and an initiation, if you will, of sorts, because when you look at initiations, you have that and baptisms. At the baptism, you have the minister there or the pastor there, you have associate ministers there, you have other witnesses and people there that are assisting, whether it's standing there with the towel for after you're dipped, or praying, or different things that are done to assist in that process. And that's sort of what goes on in some initiations that you see that have been shown. You see, groups of people. It's not just a one person thing. It's a family affair, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So being that baptisms, it because of the different systems or the different aspects of Christianity, whether it be Baptist or Methodist or things of that nature, um, prayers and such may change, but the essence of it, the foundation of it, is all based in ritual. So we have to be mindful of rumor and gossip and what we look down upon, because a lot of the things that are subscribed to that are considered the newer or the modern religions, so to speak, are actually based and founded in pure ritual. Even the Old Testament and the Bible, they got sacrifice, they got all of that stuff in there. So we have to be mindful of what we feel or what we tend to judge, because a lot of the things that a lot of people are practicing now are rooted in African spirituality and things that were done by our ancestors years and years and years ago. So we have to do the research, and it's all right to ask, well, why is this, or why is it that way? Because if you're just blindly following, you have no idea if what you're being told, if what you're absorbing is actually correct, or if it's just someone's opinion on how they interpreted something. And we all know perception is everything. So
Perceptions.
it's a good mind to make sure that we're asking the questions that are important. This is your soul. This is your inner work that you're doing. You absolutely have the right to ask questions. So that is absolutely important. But I thought that when you mentioned baptism, that was a good point, because a lot of the things that happen inside other religions, they're actually connected if you take the time to look and actually observe. And that's why I say it's not about whose God is right, whose God is wrong, because Olodumare, who we acknowledge as God, transcends all. There's no language that he does not speak. There's no prayers that he does not understand or hear. So we have to be mindful of that.
Yeah,
So
when we
yes,
look at
baptism at the crossroads. Sorry.
when when you look at baptism also, uh, part of that has hit the crossroads before it got to the water. Because once you get to the water, you've already made up in your mind the direction and path that you want to go in certain areas of life. So now you get to a point where you're at that water, and when we look at it in our traditions, we also have water that is utilized. We have the use of the herbs, and we make what we call omiato. And within the omiato, for many of the uh, the ceremonies, the person that's going through the ceremonies has to bathe with the omiato, with the distinct herbs that will bring out certain levels of manifestation for that orisha or for that particular ritual. So the water, it gives a distinct energy. It's a distinct energy when we're dealing with the water, as far as any of the rituals for us too. The herbs have distinct, energy within that. For some, we might take those spiritual baths 2 or 3 days in a row according to the ritual every day. Then also, it might be some that also place other things in. Maybe they want to add honey. Maybe they want to add cinnamon. Maybe they want to add other things that will bring out distinct things in that as well. So baptism is I believe once they get to the actual ritual, they've already hit the crossroad, but now they're stepping on the other side of the crossroad based on their choice, their decision that this is the path that they choose to follow.
Ashe.
I think you're on mute, Divine.
I think that's a good point. We have about 30 minutes left in the show. I guess 29, 28 minutes left in the show. I invite my listeners who might have a question, comment, request to press the number 1 on your telephone keypad. I'll be more than happy to unmute your mic. You can also join us live on screen by following the StreamYard link that is scrolling at the bottom of our page. And I'll be more than happy again to invite and entertain your questions, comments, or requests. I think it was also interesting to note in, sort of the discussion of trickster gods, the missing or amputation of limbs. Um, Again, Salse, from Brazil is known to have one leg. We have a former slave, which I believe goes on to be a Loa or Risha here in Louisiana, known as Bois Coupi, who escaped and escaped again, and they sought to punish him, and they cut off his arm, and he continued to escape, and then became legendary and associated with many trickster-like, crossroad-like deities and powers, even as an ancestor. So again, I find it to be a unique area of survival for traditional practice and spirits to have found new fertile ground, new fertile root here in the U.S. And how it continues to evolve and how it continues to it continues to grow. I hope I've demonstrated that the crossroads is not just the conflict or the illusion of the issue, the block, or the conflict. It very well can be just a shift in time space. It very well can be just a shift in dimensional space. Sometimes when we think about when did the problem end and when did the good times begin, we often can't pinpoint that at a particular moment in time space. We just know that we continue to grow, we continue to improve, we continue to heal, things get better, and then we sort of come to a realization that we're in a very different place. But it would be very difficult for many of us to pick a specific date, a specific time, when that crossing over the crossroads, that crossing through the interdimensional portal, if you will, of change actually occurs. And I think that's important when people are, seeking various degrees of ritual and spell work, and then are confronted with the idea of time, and then time space as time truly, moves in our universe. Sometimes the change is at the point of ebo. Sometimes the change is at the point when you humble yourself to that work, and the change is already in motion, but we can't always see the full extent of where the development is going to happen in that moment. And so I believe there's there's a transcending time and space, and sometimes dimensional space, when we address crossroads and how they might present themselves, as a part of our world or our reality.
One thing is when we think even through our enslaved ancestors, one way that Eshu shows up is in, I want to take it like in a very basic sense, in the music. When we deal with the fact that we would be drumming or certain music and maybe even dancing, we knew that the drumming changed, the rhythm changed when the communication was being put out there that the slave masters were there or they were coming. So the distinct change in rhythm, maybe just a slight rhythm change, let communication know. So then when that communication knows, there was a crossover of energy, a crossover of understanding that allowed maybe those that chose to escape. They knew the timing. There was a timing involved. Those that were escaping, those that wanted to do certain things, they knew that the slave master was there. They wasn't there. So I believe that all of that as well went into the bringing of Eshu, the Eshu mindset, the Eshu perspective. Look at all of the things that we were able to do. Eshu mindset, the thought that the people in the house slaves, were supposed to be so high sedity that there was this big conflict between the house slaves and the field slaves. When in all actuality, a lot of times it was the house slave that was given the information to the field slave for certain things to happen in the field, because they had the insight and the wisdom to listen to what was going to be happening to allow for the communication. Eshu, communication, allowing the ability to make decisions based on knowledge. So we look at all of those components, but we got to look at it from a very practical standpoint. And when we look at it from a practical standpoint, we can see now the relationship of Eshu with our ancestors and how Eshu was used in a variety of diverse ways to allow the manifestation of Eshu to rise up within us and utilize that spirit to then make changes, to escape, to be moving here, to do certain things that will allow us to be where we are today. Eshu was a great his energy was great in all that we were doing. It was great in all that we were doing.
I like how you made that analogy, without saying it directly, that Eshu was in the house and in the field.
Mm-hmm.
So just like we now understand him in many various lineages, that acknowledge Eshu and Legba and elect, well, a man of the house and the field. And it was often that field enslaved, I'm sorry, that house enslaved ancestor that also had the access to resources
That's right.
and or would take the fall for the absence or disappearance of resources because sometimes they were less likely to chop off the hand, of Nana who had to cook the food, and care for the babies than they were a field hand. So sometimes Nana would take responsibility for that jar of seeds missing, massa. Lowly me, I must have got feeble for a moment, and allow, the rest of the family or the stronger members of the family to take those resources and then flee. I like to brag just a little bit, and I remind people to go back and watch Underground for television, filmed in New Orleans. Roots for television was also filmed in Louisiana. But I really like Underground and its sort of telling of the environment leading up to a Harriet Tubman, and then how we subsequently, were responding, to that environment. And so it was not just the field, but it was a house that was also seeking freedom, that was seeking an escape, that had to learn how to hide and to conceal and to be deceitful, and to smile when you really didn't want to smile, and to say it was one way when it was really another way, particularly if it was going to mean your life, or sometimes the lives of your loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
Even in all of our discussion of the pain and the trauma, and the theatrics, I still don't think our psychics even allow many of us, just like transcend in the dimensional spaces, to really go into that place, because it was just that traumatic. It was just that traumatic. And so the games that would have been played, the mind games that would have been played, they want you to think I'm treating Oloye a little bit differently than you, Prince,
Mm-hmm.
because he read, because he's shoeing the horses,
Mm-hmm.
and they would play those games, and then they would play us against Otun. Well, the men is getting fed more, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she starts thinking about it, and then, wait a minute, and I'm the one cooking the food, and so there were all kind of games that were being played, manipulations that were being played on
Mm-hmm.
our body, on our souls, on our mind, on our level of hydration, on
Mm-hmm.
our level of protection, from the weather, all sorts of things that only, those of us who've really, have seen the bottom, of life can even imagine, what their reality would have been like.
And it's
So,
like that today too in the boardroom, right? We have those that have made it, and because maybe some have to play a particular game and act in this particular way, then we discount their ability to be able to now do what they need to do to get some other brothers and sisters in. But if we don't have people that are willing to master, they got to master the game. They got to master the game of communication. They got to master the game of working with these different cultures and different economic status and the different people in order to get others the opportunity to get through the door. I look at it from the early martial arts stage too. In this country, the Japanese, the whites did not want to teach those of us, teach our people. So we had certain pioneers that took significant hits for us in order for us to now be these African American grandmasters. But if it wasn't for them taking that hit and mastering the level of communication with the people for them to get the information, then there would be nothing that would have been moving forward for us to have today. We got to give our ancestors today and our elders. We got to give them significant credit. Hell, we can even look back to the what not just the place of COINTELPRO, but the civil rights movement. Think of the mastery that some of these guys had to have to even communicate, to get some of the bills passed, fighting from the civil rights, to deal with those people in Congress and or the president or just the racist, people, leaders of their community. We sometimes don't really recognize how much ebo they gave, how much offering, sacrifice they gave in order to open up doors. What is it that we say about Eshu? Baba, we ask that you please open all of our good doors, roads, and paths, and all the good doors, roads, and paths of those that we love, and close the doors, roads, and paths of anyone or anything meant to do harm to us or anyone that we love. So therefore, those that did and made that significant sacrifice to make these changes or get these changes facilitated in our community were working with Eshu. They opened up good doors, roads, and paths for us today. Some we, of course, maybe didn't agree with now, but back then it was all about opportunity. What was integration? Integration really was not supposed to be that we destroyed our own. It was supposed to be the opportunity that besides our own, we had the opportunity to be able to go where we wanted to go, use the facilities, buy what we wanted to buy, sit down in a restaurant to eat. But unfortunately, we looked at it in a perspective by which we started shutting our own down because we thought things were better from someplace else. So now then integration then really reversed itself and became something I feel that was kind of negative at times because it shut down our own economic blessings and buildings and the development of our own. So now I look at that and we say that's the mastery of Eshu. The mastery of Eshu was to be able to find a way to open up the good doors, roads, and paths for others to be able to follow, now to walk through that door and have the blessings that we have today in our community. It is not everywhere that we want. It is not all that we want, but damn sure is a lot more than what we had.
Yeah, let's be clear. Tulsa and Greenwood survived on segregation.
Mm-hmm.
I say survive in a way that we haven't understood in decades. That inability to have certain freedoms, certain luxuries, certain access to the quote unquote white world or mainstream world forced us to integrate amongst ourselves. Mm-hmm. and rotate that dollar 5 or 6 times within our community, and feed more than one household, more than one industry within our community. We gave up a great deal of our financial and financial freedom and independence, as well as our personal independence and freedom by way of integration. And that too, I believe, was by design. Was indeed by design. I also wanted to speak to the Goddess Initiative, beloved. I hate to break it to you. They didn't have just bed wenches, but they had wench children. They had wench children. So the little girl or the little boy was forced to sleep under the sheets to cover up massa feet, to keep his feet from getting cold in the wintertime. So you had boy and girl children wenches as well. And so everything you imply by bed wench, that's why I say if we really took the time to think about it, and I have, to meditate on it, I've been inside Booker T. Washington's house. In Washington, D.C., is it Booker T. Washington? Somehow I feel like I'm about to misquote myself again. But there's a huge mansion. No. With the afro, the revolutionary. Help me out, Otun.
Frederick Douglass?
Frederick Douglass, thank you. I have been inside Frederick Douglass' house, been in his house. I've been inside Mount Vernon, George Washington's house. Been in there, smelt it. If any of you ever been there, it's got a unique smell. That aged wood has a very specific kind of smell. The big house smells very different from the slave quarters, smells very different from the animal quarters, but it's a smell that ancient property holds even till this day. So I've sat in these environments, not just in a museum, but in these environments, and tried to envision what that must have been like.
Mm.
You know, behind Mount Vernon, George Washington's, old house, it kind of sits up on a hill, and they've got these huge rocking chairs that sort of overlook, what is now just, green and rolling fields and trees and whatnot. You can't help but envision our people out there in that sun, out there in that heat. And when you've had that kind of experience, it makes it hard to understand why, others in our community can't grasp nation building, can't grasp community building, can't grasp that, our little petty, surface, issues, pale in the face of much bigger things. And so there's a much bigger crossroad that we still have to cross, particularly if we're expecting some kind of change at the community level, within our community at the grassroots level. I think monumental changes still will be made individually by those who are able to see beyond the veils, those who are able to cross, the crossroads, with pride and dignity and a certain fearlessness, to sort of not go over and around whatever the issue might be, but to go through it, through the middle of it. We're now making martyrs, of people who are being murdered by the police. That's the proverbial going right through it. We honor our veterans and those who've gone to war and died for country. And so to what degree do we honor, these sisters and brothers and children who are giving up their lives unexpectedly, unplanned, involuntarily, and then we're holding them up, as martyrs now for a bigger purpose, that we don't fully get on board and commit to. Shortly thereafter the show today, again, another meeting, another protest, stop Congo Square, stop the expansion on the sacred space that is Congo Square, but also the historic place that is the first free Black community in America, historic Treme. And that's why I keep coming back with these topics, sacred space, the importance of sacred space. And we talked in a previous show about, sometimes we create sacred space on the ground, in the temple, in the shrine, but it's really in here, and how much we value this in here first. And then when we value this in here, it makes it much easier for us to value, the experience that I had at Frederick Douglass, mansion, the experience that I had walking literally through history, as a child, living in various points, in this country that we call, America. And so I've crossed the crossroad face on many times, sometimes not knowing where I was going to sleep, sometimes not knowing where I was going to eat, sometimes not knowing where I was going to land, at the next stage, of my journey. So I'm probably, fine-tuned for, transcending the crossroads. But I need you all to understand that there's a deeper thing that's going on. It is math, it is science, it is quantum metaphysical, it is super consciousness. We indeed do have the ability to traverse time and space with just our minds, and to recreate a reality that mirrors our best interest right here, right now, in this most present moment, in time and space. I appreciate you all. We probably have, 5 minutes, 4 minutes. Otun, I feel like you've been listening today, and I'm grateful.
Oh, I've been listening. I have no problem when it's a subject that I'm not fully knowledgeable on, or I feel in a strong manner. I have no problem with listening. I learned a great deal today. I absolutely want to learn more about crystals, and that's why learning never stops. So I have no problem with listening and absorbing it all. It has been a blessing, as you say. All is a blessing. I absolutely enjoyed myself. So I have been just absorbing everything that has been presented today. I agreed with every single bit of it. So I think it has been absolutely helpful and has also given me different things and different perspectives to consider things, and also to begin to make changes in my life. So if we're willing to actually take a look and take the lesson in things, it's a lot you can pull from it. So I'm absolutely grateful for everything, this conversation and all of the interaction today, especially with the crossroads. It's very important to understand not just the crossroads and the physical, but the symbology of it, and to use that as a reflection in our lives to different situations. I do want to speak in regards to Eshu. A lot of people think also in terms as far as him being the trickster. Understand that sometimes it's not just about things happening or certain situations going on and it's Eshu causing a problem. Sometimes things in our lives happen because it's time for that shift, it's time for that growth. We can sometimes get comfortable in where we are and what we're doing in life, not understanding that our destiny calls for something greater. And there are times when there will be things that our ancestors will allow things to happen in our life. A little bit, there were certain situations and certain things that will happen that will force us into a position where we have to grow, where we have to push out of that comfort zone, because a lot of the times that's where our blessings are. It's not in being stagnant, it's not in being complacent in that same spot. Our blessings will be getting out in that comfort zone, taking that step forward, having that faith, and knowing that we have the grace to move forward and to get to the places that we thought was only in our dreams, only in our imaginations, when in turn, those are things that we actually deserve and are destined for if we're willing to just let go of the element of control and allow the situations and the things and the lessons that we're learning to push us forward into the spaces and into the places that we're actually supposed to be and beyond.
Well,
give thanks. I certainly appreciate that.
I think another part of the symbology also is everybody's carrying around is into the Ankh now. Look at the symbology of the Ankh. Besides the crossroads,
Right, here we
you
go.
also have the divine masculine and feminine all implemented into that. So we have to then be able to look at the polarity behind that into the masculine and feminine energies and put that into our thoughts, into our actions, into our perspective. That there has to be a balance in our mind, in our hearts, and in our thoughts, and our actions, in everything. You know, many when you find that you maybe have a female Orisha as the one that is your divine head, you know, struggle with the challenge that maybe Oshun or Olokun or Oya is your divine, you know, but or Yemoya, Mami Wata. But here you go, you developing a divine balance. And that is that divine balance that brings everything into a nice wide view that allow you to be able to see things and do things from both sides. So when we look at Eshu, let's look at Eshu in a very balanced way, in a very practical way, and look how Eshu therefore shows up in our choices, in our decisions, and in everything that is manifesting for us.
I say.
And I say embrace the crossroads as a portal. I didn't get a chance to talk a whole lot about Stargate, but that could have very easily come into this conversation. The movie Stargate, and then of course the subsequent TV show that followed after. Again, that symbol, but now being used as sort of a portal, you know, with the right math and the right numbers and the right science that, like the old Star Trek, take us into greater worlds, greater realities that may very well exist right now we just can't see them. We just aren't aware. And so our blessings are often just that close. Our mishaps are often just that close. you know, Asking us to be mindful, always mindful and dutiful, and to be looking in all four directions, you know, to the best of our ability, but more importantly, looking within to manifest that which we seek to see without on the outside. I hope to see you all here Friday at high noon, if at all possible. I certainly appreciate your time and your commitment to the show. And I will have out of town guests, but I'll be here. I don't plan to miss any shows because of it. And so I look forward to connecting with you all here again at high noon, U.S. Central Standard Time, understanding that all is truly and indeed a blessing. I share. And Odabo.
Odabo.